What's up all, my name is Saib and welcome to another episode. In this episode we're just going to talk about JavaScript functions, and we're going to go over loops as well and how we can use functions in order to avoid the unnecessary duplication in our code. So functions just a way that we can actually reuse our code without any unnecessary duplications, as I said. So we can just insert a set of statements inside our functions, and then we can just call the function. And the good thing about functions is that we can pass in parameters that we can use in order to customize what gets thrown. The methods of the Canvas API, we can customize it by passing the function parameters into those methods. So simply, if we get started to apply these functions, so let's say that I want to make a function that draws a circle in our canvas. So simply I can just enter the function keyword and then followed by the name of this function. So let's say that I want to be draw circle, and then I can pass into the parentheses a set of parameters that I want to use. So for now let's not pass any parameters. Okay, so to draw a circle we have to call the arc method. Okay, just start by calling the begin path, since this is a new shape and I want it to be distinguished from all of the other shapes. Then we can call the arc. Now this arc, as I said, it takes a set of arguments that specifies how exactly the circle should be drawn. We've gone through this in the previous episodes. So yeah, let's say that I want to draw a circle in the middle of our canvas. So simply I can go like 250 for the x and y, and then for the radius let's say 50. I want this to be a full circle, so angles should be in radians, so from 0 up until 2 pi, in which is 360 degrees. And it doesn't matter if in the case of a full circle if it's anti-clockwise or clockwise. So then we can just call the fill or stroke to actually see our circle. Up until now we didn't actually call these functions, it's a function, it's preserved in this function, those statements. So if I just call this function outside of the function definition, you can see now that this function gets drawn. So okay, some people will say like, what's the difference from actually doing this and just copying the statements outside? Well, functions has parameters that we can actually use in order to customize things. Let's say that I want to use this draw circle function to just draw circles with different radius, so I can just say radius in here, and then I can pass this radius into the radius place in the arc method, so I can customize the arc. So simply now if I want to draw a circle with 100, you can see now with 100 radius, you can see now it gets drawn here. Let's say that I want to change this to be 500, it's going to be so big. Okay, let's just remove that, let's just say 30 for instance. See, it does allow us to just simply draw the circle with customization by passing the radius into the draw circle. We can also pass the x and y positions. So let's say that I want to specify I can just call position x and position y for this one, and I can pass those in the circle that way, position y for that one. Okay, so now if I want to call the draw circle that one, I'm gonna have to pass the three arguments that I specified in the definition. So let's say that I want to draw a circle up here, and then it goes one in the center and one at the end. So simply I can just specify an x and y, so I can just say 50 and 50, and I want the radius to be 30. Now we're gonna have the first circle, so let's say that I want to draw another one. I can go let's say in the center here, so 250 for the x and y, and radius of 50. So you can see how exactly we can just reuse our code without any unnecessary duplications. So yeah, that's GS functions, and when building games we make extensive use of functions. So okay, let's try to draw another circle in here just for more clarification on that. So simply say 400 and 400. I want this to be a small circle to actually see it. Okay, yeah, that way we can play and customize our arc method, or the way the circle should be drawn. We can add another start angle and end angle to this to just simply keep it customizable and just play with it. Okay, so what we can do now is that let's say that I want to just insert or draw different circles on our canvas without actually have to specify a position for the x and y, or just random ones. So we can use the random function. So let's say that I'm going to keep this with only a radius. And let's talk about loops now. Okay, for loops, simply just a number of iterations that we specify in this for loop. So this for loop is going to be executed according to how many times we want it to execute. So let's say that I want to specify a variable in here that goes, let's say it's I stands for index. So let's say I. Now I want this function to be repeated 10 times, or to be executed 10 times. And then we have to specify the condition in which the I increases every time this loop gets executed. So the first value for I is going to be 0, then it's going to be increased. It's going to be 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. Up until it reaches 9, which satisfies this condition in which I is lesser than 10. And then this for loop just stops executing. So let's say that I want to call the draw circle in here. Okay, that way. And we're going to pass in a radius of 50. But so far, the position of x and y is exactly the same. So you can see that okay, we didn't specify that one because we didn't change it. So just say 250. Now this circle, if you can see, this gets laggy, or just because there's 10 circles on top of each other got drawn on exactly this 250 and 250 for the x and y. So you can see it has this laggy thing. So yeah, let's say that I want to play with the position of x and y to just customize this. So I can just call the x position of x and position of y that way, and we can pass those parameters in the arc method, simply like that. Now we can, okay, so let's say that I want to make 3 new variables. All of them will get a random value according to JavaScript. We just use the math random. So simply I can just create a new variable. I'm going to call it position x. Now I want this position x to be assigned to a value, a random one that I don't know. So we can just call the math.random. This math.random returns a value if we multiply it by 10, for instance. Now this math random function is just going to return a value between 0 and 9. But this random returns a float number, not a decimal one. So if we want to round this one, we can use the math.round. That way we can actually get a decimal number, not a floating point or an integer. That way we can get an integer. So yeah, so this will give us a position of x from 0 up until 10. I want this to cover the whole canvas area because I want the position of x to be from 0 up until 500, just to give us random values. So we can just call our canvas and specify the width, which is 500. We can specify 500, or we can call our canvas.width that way. Okay, so let's do the same thing for the y position. So let's say math.round, because I want an integer, not a floating point. And then we can just say math.random same way, and multiply this now by canvas.height, in which is the 500, because we specified in the HTML 500 by 500 for the x and y, or the width and height, horizontally or vertically. Okay, so now let's give a circle's different radius. So we can specify a radius variable, and then I want to do exactly the same, but I want the radius to be from let's say from 10 up until 60. So this is simply done by adding another variable in here. So this math.random multiplied by 50 will give us a value from 0 up until 49, then plus 10, and the max value is going to be 59 from 10 up until 59. So that seems like a good radius for a circle, and then we can pass all of these arguments in them. So simply like that. Now you're going to see that we're going to have 10 circles with different positions and different radiuses. So if I just see that way, different radiuses for circles and different x and y positions, that goes from 0 up until 500, and same for the y and for the radius it goes from the smallest radius is 10, while the largest radius is 10 plus 49, which is going to be 59. So yeah, simply like that we can manipulate the code with functions and loops in order to reuse our code without any unnecessary duplications, as I said. And yeah, let's try this with a rectangles. So let's specify a different color for this one. Okay, let's say fill style, and we're gonna call the RGBA function. We've spoken about colors in a previous episode, you should check that one. Okay, so let's say that I want these circles to be blue, but let's give it a 50% transparency. That way we can see it's gonna be, so we can see if the circles are on top of each other. That also, let's increase, if I want to increase this the number of circles, I can just increase the execution of the loops to increase the loops. So I can just say 50 for instance. You're gonna see that we have a lot of circles, so let's keep it on 30 that way. Okay, so and every time we refresh our web page, it's gonna have a new values for the x and y and for the radius. That's why it's not exactly the same. Okay, so let's try to write a new function for the rectangles. Let's say, so I can just say function, I can call draw rectangle, and then I'm gonna come here and then begin path, since this is a new shape. Let's call the fill rect. Let's call the rect first, and then we're gonna have to pass the x and y. So simply I'm just gonna have the different x and y positions. If I want to call this draw rectangle and pass in the x and y for those, they're gonna have the same x and y positions for the rectangle and the circle, so they're gonna be on the same place. But if I just use this same definition for those variable and then just implement it in this functions, so they have a different value. Okay, so and then I can pass those into the rect. Okay, now for the width and height, I can just specify a different width and a different height that way, and then pass them into the arc method. Then I can just say fill, since this is a rect, or I can call the fill rect directly. So let's specify a different color, that way RGA, and then let's say that I want this one to be green with a transparency as well, 50%. That way we're gonna have this draw rectangle, but here we have to give a different values for the width and height. So same way I can reuse this function exactly. So I want the width to be between let's say 0 and 1 and 100, or 1 so say plus 1, and I can give it 100 for instance. Same goes to with the radius. Okay, this one. Let's say that I want it to be from 1 up until 100. So the highest value of the highest width is going to be 100, and the lowest width is going to be just simply 1. So yeah, and same goes to the height. Let's keep it the same way. That way, and then we're going to have to call the draw rectangle, and then I'm going to just pass the width and height. Now if you see, we have those different rectangles, and the circles give us this piece of art, or just like a different weird shape. I know this is meaningless, but the way that you reused a code and without actually going and duplicate the code is just a neat way to do things. Okay, this is simply everything you need to know about just code reusabilities and random values, functions and loops. Let's say that I want to erase all of that. Let's comment all of this out. So simply just to try another example. Okay, so let's go in here. Let's say that I want to draw dashes of lines, just that a piece of line in here and a line in here. But every time a new line gets drawn, I'm just gonna give it a another width, or just increase the width of it by 1. So simply we can call a new for loop. Give it a variable. I'm just gonna say I stands for index, and then I is less than, let's give it a 30 lines, or simply let's give it 30 lines that way. Okay, or just 20 lines. I think 20 will be enough, so that because our canvas isn't like tall, very tall. Okay, so then increase the I. So this will execute from I equals to 0 up until I equals 19, which will give us 20 iterations. Okay, so let's specify now, say, line width. So I'm just going to specify a line width. So I want the first line width to be 1 plus I. So for the first line width will be 1, since it's 1 plus 0 for the first iteration of the for loop. And then it's going to be 2, then 3, then 4, then up until 20 when the I is equals 19, which is the latest iteration. So simply then we can specify, let's say, begin path, since a new line is to be done. And then let's call the move to. Let's pick up an x and y coordinates for the starting point, in which it's gonna be drawn. We're gonna draw a line after that one by going to line 2. So simply let's say that I want this to be from 0, which starts at this one. And for the y coordinates, I'm gonna increase the y simply by just giving a 10 plus 30 multiplied by I. Now the first value for this move to is gonna be I is gonna be 0, so it's gonna be 10. So it's gonna go from 0, 10 that way. It's gonna be right here nearly. And then it's going to increase by staying at the same x level, which is 0, but increasing in the y, since the second one is going to be 1, then 30 plus 10 is going to be 40, and that goes down that way. It's going to increase the line width for each line. Then we're going to go to line 2, and line 2 is going to be right here, so 200, since I'm going to draw a line that way. So okay. Same goes for the y level, because I want it to be exactly a straight line, then multiplied by I. I hope this makes sense. So let's just specify a stroke style for the color of this one. Let's say that I want this one to be green, so I can just say green, and then I have the stroke method. Now if you look at this, you can see how we got these bars that increase in width. Each new line gets drawn. If I want to do this exactly the opposite, I can simply just start from 20 and then minus that one by I. So you can see that we have the opposite of this. It starts with the highest line width, then keeps decreasing. So let's say that I want to draw the same thing but the opposite. So let's keep this one back to 1 plus I. Okay, let's do the opposite of this line width. We can make a different lines that decrease in width, unlike this one increases. So simply I can just create a new for loop. I can just keep it that way. I want it to be 20 lines, same as that one. Okay, we're gonna do exactly the same, but now the line width is gonna be different, and of course the x and y coordinates will be different, since we're using this at the end of our canvas. So it's 20 minus I that way, and then let's call begin path again. Now let's use the move to, and let's move to 300. I think this one is the end of our canvas. 300 for the x. Now for the y, it's going to be exactly the same. I want it on the same level for the y, for those lines. So I can just copy that one, and just to not waste the video time. And then line 2 to 500, so that it's at the end of our canvas. It goes from 300 to 500. And the same goes for that one. And then let's specify a different stroke style. Okay, let's keep this one blue again, or steel blue. It's a nice color. And then let's call stroke. Now we're gonna see that we have the opposite of that one that goes from that way. So yeah, this is simply. I hope this like gives you the basic understanding of, or a limited understanding of, how loops and functions work, because in games we make extensive use of loops and functions, and we avoid code duplications. We just keep it neat and easy to understand. Yeah, I hope that makes sense, and I'll see you in the next episode.